Birthday on Saturday early in the morning. This is April 22nd at 7:30 a.m. Richard Stern is hosting a birding walk, and there's a few spaces left. So if you're willing to be up at the crack of dawn and go birding with Richard, it should be a fantastic time. All the details are on the website, or you can come up to me afterwards. 7:30 till noon-ish. In Kentville, Palmer Woods, and then perhaps somewhere else thereafter. So that's on Saturday, and then on Sunday we have our biannual highway cleanup here in Wolfville at 9 in the morning. This is Sunday, April 23rd. So we welcome any hands that are willing to come pick up what I've already noticed is a good accumulation of spring litter. So I'm sure we'll fill our bags and we'll meet at Albertines. So that's what's coming up. Okay, enough of me. Let's get to what we're all here for, which is we're delighted to have Melissa MacDonald, who's a BNS member, talk about creating bird-friendly communities and reducing bird window collisions. So I'll let Melissa introduce herself and start the talk, and you have to hit record.
I did that.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for coming. And so I'm only talking about bird window collisions. I guess as a consequence of that, that is creating a bird friendly. Just to be clear, what I am talking about is about bird window collisions. And so how I came at this particular topic. So I'm a recently retired environmental lawyer from Toronto. And working in Toronto, urban environment, I wanted to have a little more future. And so the best way for me to get that contact was in fact volunteering with an organization called FLAT. Now some of you may have heard of it, Fatal Light Awareness Program.
Not yet.
It's a great organization.
I will.
I volunteered with them for about 8 years, and I was a patroller. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what FLAT does. It has different arms. But essentially, Toronto is on a major migratory bird pathway. Spring and summer, spring and fall, both directions. You've got thousands of migratory birds passing over Toronto. You've got the Great Lakes. You've got great habitat for birds. Less great now that it's very urbanized. And what would happen, and what still happens, is when birds are flying, they rely on different navigational skills. I don't know all of those skills. I can't describe them, but what I do know is that city lights, bright lights, can throw them off the use of those navigational skills. Where that becomes a problem is when there's a low ceiling, you've got cloud, low ceiling, cloud cover, you've got fog. So what happens is the birds tend to come down, they're thrown off, they can't see, if they're navigating according to the stars, and all of a sudden they're down in this urban environment. These are forest-dwelling migratory birds. You've got your woodcocks, you've got your warbirds, you've got your thrushes, and they're lost in this environment. And they want to get out as quickly as possible. And they see what they think might be a way through. They may see a reflection of a tree. They're panicking, they take off, boom, they hit a window. So a very astute financial services worker in the 90s, he was walking to work, and in various spring and falls, he was noticing hundreds of birds that he wasn't used to seeing on the sidewalks. And he wasn't a birder. He knew his pigeons, he knew his gulls, but these were different. These were colorful yellow-bellied sapsuckers or flickers. And so then the organization FLAT was born. So what I did as a volunteer is every spring and fall during migration, I would rise an hour before, actually more than an hour before sunrise. I would rise really early in the morning to get downtown for an hour before sunrise. So if you're thinking springtime, it's getting earlier and earlier, as we all know, and probably all just hiding from where our morning sunshine coming into our bedroom right now. So I'd be down an hour before sunrise with my butterfly net and my backpack. And I had a set circuit that I would go in the financial district looking for fallen birds. Now these were either dead or injured. And I would stay for 2 hours. And I had this circuit, and I would collect birds. I would compete with gulls, like I had many, I'm my instrument scare off the gull. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I wasn't. I would run raccoons, like, you're not gonna get that. That was very clever. Raccoons knew where to go to get their food. They knew that as a food source, because it happened for years and years. So that's how I got into this. I did it for 8 years. It requires speed and agility, which 8 years mine has been decreasing. So after 8 years, sadly, yeah, I stopped doing that. But the organization itself, if you're curious, they do advocacy, they do education, they're responsible for research, and it all started with this one guy. So I really can't speak enough of that, and you will hear me refer to them throughout my talk. So that's me. And let me just get the slide show over here. Oops. Okay.
There it is.
I just takes a second. All right, so my aim tonight
So you can keep.
is to
I can't see the chat when I got my presentation.
is to provide you with the information that will help you understand the problem. It's much more complicated. It's simple and complicated at the same time. It's simple, birds fly windows, they die. Well, why do they do that? And what's going on in their brains as far as we know? What is the research? So that's what I'm going to be starting that. So helping you understand the problem of the collisions. So I'm going to look at first the bird population decline, the causes of the decline, and why birds collide with glass. Then we're going to get into the solution. So looking at general guidelines, looking at which windows pose a risk, and then looking at actual solutions from simple, cheap, temporary to more permanent. And that's what I'm hoping, if you're motivated, after I'm not giving you context, that you'll feel the impetus to put some of these.
Lights.
Maybe move it on top of the projector. Yeah. Oh, yes.
You're having a technical.
You're.
No, now it's perfect.
That's better.
Reflection of my scene. Okay. All right, so
Next slide.
the first thing I want to start is looking at the bird population decline. So this gives us the context that you're going to put this problem. So this is from a study, Rosenberg et al. Let me see. Out of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, and the decline of the North American avifauna, published in Science in 2019. So approximately 48% of species worldwide are known or suspected to be in population declines. I'm sure that's no surprise. I'm speaking to the converted, you're aware. So estimates for bird populations, so that's worldwide. So let's go to North America. Estimates for bird populations in North America indicate a net loss close to 3 billion birds, or 29% of 1970 numbers. So that's a lot of birds. Sorry. Now, of that 29%, of that 3 billion birds, a total of 419 native migratory species experienced a net loss of 2.5 billion individuals since 1970. And this is probably some of the species, more than 90% of the total cumulative loss can be attributed to 12 bird families, including sparrows, warblers, blackbirds, and finches. So this gives us a graphical representation of that one. So it's the same statistic that I just mentioned. This is taken from Rosenberg et al. This shows the decline, North American decline, 70%. Yes, so it's 70% since 1970. Oh, sorry. How many numbers are on there? We'll move back there again. 29%. 29%. Thank you. 29% of the 1970 numbers in 2010. So that's a pretty steep curve. Then we come here, and this is looking at birds according to habitat. So we'll just step out of the way here. If we look at Nova Scotia, we fall into the boreal forest. So we're looking at a very steep decline in the boreal forest of bird species. sadly. And then over here, we're looking at a proportion of species decline in that habitat. So we're looking at 50% of the species in our habitat and border forests. So it's significant. Okay, this is just a different graphic and it's showing some species. So the gains and losses across the North American avifauna over the past half century. So lots of sparrows, wood warblers, blackbirds, and we've got declines even in our imported species, or world sparrows, starlings. Let's see what else here. This might be of interest. Actually, this is of interest. Waterfowl is the only species that seems to be increasing. So that's some good news. But with other species, shorebirds, we've got more than a 25% decline since 1970. Introduces significant land birds, 25%. So we know we're suffering a decline. This shows you some of the happening of that. So why do we care about the decline? So again, I'm preaching to the converted, but I think it's just good to be reminded of why we care about birds. So they have functional roles within our ecosystem, so we help increase and maintain biodiversity. We know they're pollinators, we know they're seed dispersers, they're ecosystem engineers, and an example of that would be a woodpecker who's kept a nice hole in an old tree that could become habitat or a nest for another species. They're scavengers and predators. We have evidence of all of these here. Birds support pest control and sustainable agriculture. They eat insects and rodents that affect crops. And of course, there's the cultural role of birds. They've been used as symbols in our throughout human history. And of course, bird watching is a pastime that a lot of people around the world are taking. Okay, just a few more points about why we care about the decline. This is my personal one that I'm putting here. Birds have been on this earth longer than Homo sapiens. If you look back to the earliest known fossil of the bird, Archaeopteryx, it's 150 million years old. If you look at Homo sapiens, we've been here 300,000 years. Our evolution probably started 6 million years ago. We're wiping these other species out, which I find distressing as a Homo sapien. And I think this is a really key point to drive home the purposes of the talk tonight. So Rosenberg made the observation that species extinction, because when we're talking decline, we're not necessarily talking extinctions, but species extinctions define global biodiversity crisis, because extinction begins with loss in declines. So finally, Rosenberg tells us that monitoring data suggests that avian declines will likely continue without targeted conservation action. That's what we're going to be doing tonight, hopefully, which will result in triggering additional endangered species listings, which have a tremendous financial and research cost. So, developers, for instance, if they're working in an area where there's an endangered species, they have to go through permits and consulting. All sorts of steps that they have to go through, and that's what we run into. So why do we have to get to this step? All right. So why is the world's bird population declining? So according to the 2022 State of the World's Birds Report, the causes are multifactorial. And again, none of this will be new to you. You will know this, you will have heard this before. Habitat loss, including habitat degradation and fragmentation, predation by introduced animals such as rats, mice, cats, big one, dogs, and pigs. This one you may not have been aware of is one of the major causes of our decline. Infrastructure, including buildings, which are considered to be the second largest anthropogenic cause of direct avian mortality. So our built environment, second largest. And lumped in with that is energy demands and popular pollution. We have agricultural and pharmaceutical usage, climate change, and I think that's in my list, yes. So let's look at why Canada's bird population declining. So this is based on a study that was specific to Canada. So it's going to be the same cause of what I listed. But let's look at some numbers. So this is a 2013 study, Calvert et al. And he studied this question, or they studied, I should say, in their paper, the synthesis of human-related avian mortality. So what they did is they looked at estimates of avian mortality in Canada and synthesized the data from a range of industrial and other human activities. Part of the data they would rely on would have been the birds that the flat patrollers fly. That was another thing that came out of the volunteering with flat. The volunteers are very good at tallying their collections every day, the date, the time, where the building is, the south and north face of the building, etc. So that sort of data is really useful in research study. So what Calvert et al. Estimated, these are pretty big numbers, 269 approximately, 269 million birds and 2 million nests are destroyed annually in Canada, so it's every year in Canada. The equivalent of over 186 million breeding individuals. So picture the water. And so their conclusion, after looking at all the data, as to a major cause of the decline of bird population in Canada, specifically, the combination of cat predation, again, things with the cats inside. I'm a big cat lover, but yeah, don't be just as happy inside. Other big cause, collisions with windows, vehicles, and transmission lines. Those elements, those factors right there, greater than 95% of all mortality. That's huge. And that seems like, those are pretty easy things to do to help avoid that particular mortality rate. All right. So I highlighted that because that's what I want us to keep in mind. So not over 95% are caused by cats and collisions. And it wasn't just collisions with windows, that was a big one. Okay, so Calvert et al. Also did a graphic that I reproduced here that shows the approximated distribution of birds killed by collisions with windows. And you can see it follows basically the population density of Canada. So where the population is very dense, close to the US border, we've got a higher rate of mortality. This would be Toronto here, Ottawa here. These two places both have volunteer patrol, volunteer patrols, I guess. And this is with the flat, this is with the different organizations, so they have the data in those particular areas. You can see it's also a higher rate of mortality. So, estimates of birds killed annually by colliding with windows. So, this was the subject of a study by MacDonald April in 2013. And so they estimated that about 25 million, an estimate, so they figured the range of 16 to 42, 25 million birds are killed by colliding with windows in Canada annually. So this is a really key slide for us, I think, in our situation here. But estimates are based on available data and on modeling. They concluded, and I highlighted this to put it in bold, houses likely cause 90% of building-related mortalities, which we probably wouldn't think would be the case because, it's our house, it's a bird, maybe another bird, but there are so many houses and people aren't collecting data house to house to house, so we don't have all that information. When we have all the houses and all the windows, it starts to make sense that it is a significant cause contributor. So 90% of building-related mortalities caused by houses, low-rise buildings, slightly less than 10%, tall buildings, approximately 1%. And so this is a direct quote from MacDonald April. The disproportionate contribution of mortality caused by houses is a function of the relative number compared to the two other classes of buildings. So that's what I was saying. There's only one class. Okay, their review found that warbirds and sparrows were the most commonly killed birds in low-rise and tall buildings. And there's insufficient information on species that houses to determine proportions. Nobody's tallying that. It would be very difficult to do that. I don't know how you would do it. Okay. Although I will mention something later that will help us to happen. Okay, so let's try to understand more about why birds fly to the grass. So there is an ornithologist, Dr. Daniel Clem, who's out of the Midwest. He was a pioneer in this particular area of research. And he was the first to start to talk about, well, okay, birds, they're behaving as if street glass is invisible to them. And birds, he's concluded, birds cannot recognize glass as a solid matter. So in the daytime, birds crash into windows because they see reflections of vegetation. So I'm sure you've seen that. You look at your window, see what kind of reflection you've got. You've got trees, if there are trees on the other side of the window. Or they see through the glass the potted plants of vegetation that might be just on the other side of the window. And at nighttime, nocturnal migrants crash because they fly into light of windows. So what does that mean? You have to make windows visible to birds. You just don't see them. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of really brief excerpts from videos with, I think we'll just emphasize the point about why birds can fly over glass. But we're going to be looking at these images through our eyes, through humans' eyes. But I know the first time I looked at it, I was pretty surprised. So I think the first one is just a little bit more than a minute 17. The second one's about 10 seconds.
There's feedback. You wanna know.
There, for this, so we can make sure we can coordinate
I'm ready.
between your home screen.
I'm so proud of us.
And the Zoom and the computer.
I mean, let's hope it works. We shouldn't have jinxed it.
Okay, so this video, BBC came to Toronto to film the issue of bird-litter collision. So it's talking about the urban environment. What I'm going to show you, I think, is relevant for the point I want to make.
I don't think so.
I'm going to stop it at 1:17.
Maybe we'll see if anybody.
So we'll see how it goes here. It's not loud. Bear with me while I turn the volume here. Can I turn the volume from here?
It should be.
Oh, it's right here. Yes, you should be. Yes, I think wow.
Northern Oriole or Baltimore Oriole.
Disproportionately, they tend to die more frequently than some of the small species do.
Sadly, we pick apart too many of this particular species. They hit with such tremendous force that they tend to die more frequently than some of the smaller species do. The impact is too great for them to sustain.
See if I can.
Yes, if we can hear.
I controlled as a flat controller, or is it not controlled? I'm just going to take it back 2 seconds. All right, here we go again. So, did I control that?
The companies issues that.
So did everybody catch that? Yes. Yeah. The first time I watched this, I was food. I thought that, okay, that's where I controlled. No, that was the reflection. Okay, so next I'm going to show you another video. This is very brief.
Hold on. Wait.
So the second one, why birds fly in flocks, got it? Okay. So nice photo along the tree with the string. Enjoying the view. Did I fool you? Yeah. Okay. And the last video I'm going to show you. So the last one is what FLAC does when we collect the birds. We take the dead ones.
Neurologists are shocked.
And then they go to FLAC at the end of the season, and then FLAC gives them to the Royal Ontario Museum. Wrong, somebody may be familiar with it. But before they give them to the ROM, they do an annual layout to demonstrate the toll of the windows and the birds, to demonstrate the mortality. So this is done every year. I've chosen 2015 mainly because I was there. Very moving.
No audio.
And the mom was
She's
there.
coming through, I know.
So
I'm not sure.
I want to share this
Maybe the one that we can have.
really to emphasize the toll of the mortality. And
We already
if
have
you
two
think about
people.
all the birds that hit the house, that you could gather them all together, it would be way more than
I don't say.
here. And this is what I'm going to show you.
2 minutes.
Actually, what the birds in the cage. But I think it really draws the energy. So, we're going to be video number 3, and then we'll got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I started out in the tire industry.
Very sad. Oops. Perfect. Don't want
Oh, that was hard to watch.
Go back into the slides. And if you're interested in more information, FLAC.org is the. Right. So this is a particular interesting slide, I think, to this group. It helps us to understand more about the sensory ecology of birds. This is taken from paper written by Shepherd, 2019. She did a literature review. Basically why people were, why birds were getting windows, and then he was looking at some of the aspects associated. So this is what she collected from the literature review as to why birds fly. So most birds have eyes on the sides of the head. So we're thinking of birds flying straight ahead, window, reflection. Okay, they have their eyes on the side of their head. There's little overlap of their visual field. They have modest three-dimensional vision that is obstructed to various degrees by the bill. So unlike humans, we tend to focus on what is in front of them. Birds look to the side for information concerning flight information. So they're not looking necessarily too closely at that reflected image. Birds have poor contrast sensitivity compared to humans, meaning that humans are better at distinguishing between objects in a distance than birds. And I thought this was interesting. So a recent study showed that budgies were accurately aware of their own wingspans. It could be seen to modify the position of their wings depending on the width of a gap in their path. So this directly relates to the design of patterns intended to deter collisions. And so she concluded because small songbirds are frequent victims, patterns must have relatively narrow spacing related directly to bird body size. And I'll come back to that when I look at these two opinions on the markers that are going to go on the outside of the window. I'll sort of refer not to this particular point when we get to. Okay, so we got the information. We know it's a problem. We know that birds don't necessarily, they seem to see glass, they see reflections. We understand more why because of their ecology, their sensory ecology. Now we're going to look at solutions. So I think this is a really important point. I mean, we're all here because we're concerned about the environment, about nature. This is a problem, bird collisions, and we can actually do something about it. So we're overwhelmed by the bad news that we get about the environment, so climate change, pollution, contamination. It's overwhelming. You know, what can we do about it? Well, this is something that you and I can do something about right now. So I think that's the key point to take from my presentation. Okay. So you may have a problem, you think you have a problem, where do you have the problem? So these are some questions that they were put together by Dr. Daniel Klein, I mentioned him earlier, pioneer in this field. So trying to identify which of the windows may pose a greater risk or pose a threat to birds. So have you heard or found a bird that collided with the window? I'm sure I certainly have. I'm sure a lot of us have. Can you see the surrounding landscape being reflected in the window? Is there interior greenery visible through the window from the exterior? Can you see through the window to an adjacent side of your home? So, for instance, a sunroom, you've got a window here, you've got a window here. And is there a bird feeder and bird blocking greater than half a meter from the window? I think there has been advice in the past to put your bird feeder within half a meter from the window. Some of the research I've been looking at still says that those windows should still be treated, but that's not a complete solution. And one other one that I've certainly noticed, have you ever seen a little feather stuck in the window? Yeah. So when birds hit the window, it's so stressful they start to shed they immediately shed feathers. And so that's one of the reasons you're going to see that feather stuck in the window. I've certainly seen it. Okay, so the solution is visual markers on the outside of the window. The solution now, it used to be that people would put a silhouette of a raptor on the inside of the window. It's happened at hoping it would work. But putting something on the inside of the window is not effective. And putting one marker on a window is insufficient. So Shepherd, she made her conclusions. The row of decals from people, glass wall here, is to birds a row of obstacles to fly above or below, because they're looking at their vertical wingspan. Okay, something there, I'm gonna look here, the window there, yeah, okay. So if they can even see the decal, which you probably can't if it's on the interior surface. So what's the science? So we'll get to some science which is supporting it. And interestingly, that science is just really recent, where people have tested what birds see and don't see. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So these are Flat Canada's guidelines for visual graphics. So spacing. Separate markers by no more than 2 by 2 inches, 5 by 5 centimeters. We'll see some pictures of this later on. Markers must stand out in contrast to the transparent and reflective glass surface under varying daylight conditions. Markers should be no less than 6 millimeters in diameter. Cover the entire glass surface and apply markers to the exterior surface of the glass. So these standards, the black standards were, I think in 2019, I think that's what this is, a CSA standard, were incorporated in the CSA standard, Canadian Standard Association, bird-friendly building design. And that's it. So let's look at markers and why we have to have an exterior side of the glass. Okay, so this is a very recent study. Swaddle et al. 2023. And so they conducted what they identified as the first experimental study to compare the effectiveness of 2 distinct window films. So one UV, one orange wavelength black. So comparing using the films on the internal versus the external surface of double glazed windows. So here we have a study that's looking at this, which is great. So they quantified the window avoidance flight behaviors of zebra finches in controlled flight trials in open air aviary for all treatment conditions compared with interactions with untreated control. So they had outside, and 2 films, inside, and then untreated. They also performed a binary choice trial in which one window was treated and the other was untreated. So the authors concluded that I will say in the test, no finches were injured because they had a mist net before the birds would hit the window. So I had to read that to make sure. I was very ready to read that. So the authors concluded that the 2 films increased window avoidance by 47% and 39% respectively when on the external surface of the window. However, neither product was effective when the films were applied to the internal surface of the windows. So it's nice to finally see some studies that are explaining that. There were, Dr. Daniel Clemens, I mentioned earlier, he's done a lot of field studies, testing different markers, and those date back to the 80s and 90s. This is a little bit different. Good to hear about. Okay, so what can you do? So I'm going to go through solutions ranging from easy, quick, simple, cheap, temporary, sort of going up the spectrum to going across the spectrum to a little bit more permanent to high-end expensive, depending on what you're doing, what you're trying to establish. Okay, first one, temporary but quick solution. Simply take a bar of soap, something that's going to show ivory, and use a bar of soap to draw a design, pretty picture, or repeating patterns. You just have to remember the guidelines. So just out you go. It will wash off pretty quickly when you get rainfall. You could do it again. You may not get rain for a while. It looks like the earth is pretty dry out there these days. So it's just something that can be very quick if you're just concerned about addressing the issue right now. And this is a video still from Flat Canada video that explains just how you do that. Next one. Okay, another temporary and quick one. This is one you can do with your grandkids, with your children. I think this is a fun one. So basically what you're taking is washable, non-toxic tempera paint. Put a design on the inside of the window. Go to the outside and then just trace, like you used to do a stencil when just trace the design onto the window, and you can have a lot of fun with that. We're going to do it. And again, there's a girl, Flat Canada, for more information on that, but it's pretty straightforward. But that's the thing, all these solutions, until we get the really high-end ones, they're simple, they're easy and quick. Well, some of them are good. Okay, lines of tape. So this is where you see a couple of different approaches. So Flat talked about markers that are 2 inches apart, and I think it's the next one that will show you that. And so they do that both lengthwise and crosswise. This approach you'll see if you're looking on the internet looking for sources, just vertical lines that are no more than 4 inches apart, preferably a little bit less. And that's relying on basically the idea that the birds are looking to get through something that will allow them to clear their wingspan. So if there's something a little bit narrow, then I can't get through that kind of thing. So you'll see this vertical approach, and you'll see with the next approach, vertical and horizontal. So easy. I've done this one with tape. I did an earlier one with a UV marker, which I'm not sure is effective, and Flat discourages UV until there's more science on whether or not putting something in the UV spectrum on the window is really effective. But quick and easy, tape on the window. I had where was I was in Torbay in 2018, 2019. I was renting a house in the house, and boom, there was a wall actually shook, and it was a fraction shock. Hit the window, and it was down on the ground. It wasn't dead. I was sitting there stunned for about 4 or 5 minutes. He was going after the pigeon and just flew right into the window. Didn't die. I was very distressed and just went out and got some masking tape, some painters to it, and do this sort of thing. Okay. More ideas. So this particular approach, I've done many times. So this is originated with Feather Friendly, and basically it's tape that you're putting 2 inches apart. Now the strip of tape actually had some tape and such to bring me tonight, and I left it in a different bag. So unfortunately, we don't have show and tell objects in front of us. But it's pretty straightforward. So you have a strip of tape, you have measuring tape along the side, along the top, and then you're just making lines of tape, or sticking the lines of tape across the window, and you take credit card, piece of plastic, and push it along the tape, and those dots are left behind, and then when you take it off, so you peel it back and the dots are left. It's pretty unobtrusive. Some people don't like it. You don't see it after a while. It's effective. It's definitely effective. So you can get this tape. VValley has it. Featherfriendly.com has it, and liveescape.org has it. So definitely fairly readily available. It's not as cheap as a masking tape, but less obtrusive on dirty. Okay, so these are windows at the dot tape 5. So that's what it looks like when you're. And another approach, relying on the 4 inches that would stop the bird from going through because of the wingspan. This is one I did. This particular one, what I started with was, if you're do-it-yourselfer, it's very easy. I started with J channel from vinyl siding. So I wish I had a demonstration here, but this is the J channel. This is white piece up here. And right through here. So I got it for, I don't know how much I paid, I can't remember where it wasn't very much. Stores have it as part of their vinyl siding packaging. So basically what I did, so the J channel, it comes with so it's like a J, and then the upper part has basically slots that you would be putting the nails through, I guess, if you're using the side. So I cut that off, that part. So I was just left with what we put like a U. And then I drill holes every 4 inches. All the way along that J channel, both sides, making sure they would line up. And then I used paracord, I believe it's called. And I just basically pull it through the holes. Now, if you're smarter than me, you'll make your holes fairly big, so you're not struggling to get them through. That was a real big. And the other thing, again, if you're smarter than me, I should have flipped this U over, so I had it that way. I should have flipped it over, so it was that way, would have been more aesthetically pleasing. But that's what it looks like. And actually, I don't know if you can see it here. So that's a picture of a raptor. Definitely on the inside of the window, it's been there for years. This, you see that little spot there? It was a hairy woodpecker that hit the ground, and it was beautiful. It had its wings were spread out in a beautiful. It was very distressing. All right. So that you can get more information on this particular approach, and you can get creative ways. Birdsavers.com is the that will help give you all sorts of information there. Okay, top of the line, and we're getting to the end here. Are you designing a new house and installing new windows? So motorized exterior screens and shades. I don't know how many of us are going to do that, but I'm just putting it out there in case you won the lottery. This is what you're doing. Well, etched glass. So this is etched glass, following those guidelines that I'm talking about. So what is not effective? We're getting to the end here. So according to BirdSafe Canada, what is not effective? Interior blinds, scapes and screens, angled glass, awnings and overhangs, not effective. Tinted or colored glass, not effective. They still reflect. Where I worked in Toronto, Ministry of the Environment, we had black glass, and still, yeah, it didn't stop collisions. Other ineffective bird deterrents, high pitch frequency devices, scare balloons, noisemakers, and cannons. Treatments applied to the inside of them as well. We're convinced of that one now, having learned more about bird sensory ecology and seeing what the science says. Any visual markers in this space too far. Now, this is flat was saying UV treatments, so using markers that are ultraviolet wavelength. They don't feel there's enough scientific evidence to show they're widely effective, so that may be something that's coming in the future. But they suggest avoiding that until you're removed. And finally, if you do want to report bird collisions, there is an app for that, of course. Birdmapper.org, you don't have to have it do it on your phone, it's also available on the website of the browser. So you can report and view the locations of bird collisions with buildings across the globe. You can report without having an account, but if you want to actually count, the previous reportings, then you would have to do that. But it's something interesting. It's interesting to look at, and it's growing. Most of the information that is coming from Toronto, because that's where I think people are really aware of it, and you're supposed to count it out of Toronto. But something to look at. Yeah, you can participate. And that is it. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I'll ask one.
Okay, can we make the mic? People on. Thank you.
Yeah, we have windows on our south side. We have a and we get birds connected, so birds. One question: are there certain species that are more prone to getting windows? Because every year I get a oven bird, which is not a feeder bird. And I can't figure out why I'm gonna do it, anyway, there's no way.
So what I've learned is that birds can learn that if they go in this direction, they hit a hard surface. So your bird feeders might, your birds and your bird feeders might have learned through keeping hard surfaces that they shouldn't go that direction. They actually, for instance, zoos. I was reading zoos in Europe. If they're putting birds in a new display, or they're not going to be Saturday, what they'll do is they'll put birds on the inside. They'll put markers on the inside to prevent them from hitting the window, so they'll learn that if they go this way, there's something harder. Then they'll take the decals away, and the bird has learned there's a surface there. I can't go there or I'm gonna hurt myself. So the other bird, he hasn't been around the house. He's, why he's going by your house, I don't know. But there would have been no opportunity for him learning. They wouldn't have seen it. It's probably the best answer I can give you. We looked at the breakdown of species. We looked at one that looked at, you have to go back to see what he was listing for the birds that are more commonly killed in the data that he had, killed by window collisions. We can do that, but I think a lot of it, we just don't have the data to understand it, to be honest. Another question?
I've seen birds.
Just so the folks on Zoom can hear. Thank you.
Well, I've noticed birds like, not necessarily flying into windows, but I have a garden shed, and quite often I notice the sparrows, they're fluttering up against them. Or I've seen the same thing like on rear view mirrors on cars. So I guess they must be seeing the reflection and thinking it's another bird or something.
So that's exactly it. So what they see the reflection of themselves, and they see that as a bird threatening their territory. So I've seen that many times actually, and especially if it's during mating season, so in the spring, the male's probably trying to gather food for the kids. Or maybe the mother's still in the nest. So they're using a lot of energy trying to fight off that threat. So what I've done is I've put up this something in one case, it's just a brand, so they wouldn't see that reflection. So they wouldn't be expending that energy necessarily. Yes.
And my son with the bird feeders.
So
Thanks, Alan.
they used to say within a half a meter of your house, 3 feet of your half a meter to 3 feet of your house. What I've been reading recently is yes, but you still have to put markers on your windows, because even though the bird feeder is quite close, and I think the theory was that, okay, if they take off, they don't have very far, so they wouldn't have been able to build up a lot of speed, so the collision would have been more lower impact. But what I've been reading more often is, okay, they're still colliding. We don't want that. So yeah, if you do put it close to your house, and you still probably want to have markers, if there's a window nearby.
I have a question.
Margaret? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We had quite a large deck in front of the house, so I'm looking and find a space and watching the tide come in, the tide go. You do that in Nova Scotia. You can't do that in Trumbull. They, and we had a wooden deck with wooden railing. There was no problem until we had to replace the deck. And we used a composite material. We used aluminum railing with glass panels in between. And have they ever attracted a lot of birds? So my wife and I thought about putting something up on the railing over the glass that would tell them, you shouldn't be flying here. And we went to the dollar store and picked up a whole string of Nova Scotia flags. Nova Scotia flags. 30 centimeters long and
Mhm.
15 centimeters wide, all tied together. So we put those from panel to panel, not in a straight line, but
Right.
yeah.
So on top of the railing? Or-
They're hanging from the top railing. Yeah,
So in front of the
but they're
box.
down in the glass about a
Right.
quarter of the way, not all the way to the
Right.
glass.
Right.
And that kept the birds. I told the birds, hey, don't fly here.
Okay, so that's good. The guidelines would have said cover more of the glass because they could see it as, you know, a barrier that would have to go over or under. So depending on how much space there is. So the ideal would have been maybe another.
A row of Ontario flags. You could add a row of Ontario flags, favorite flag.
I'm gonna try new land plan again.
So another row of flags below that. Would be even better.
Yes, okay. The other thing I wanted to comment on, I didn't see any statistics for our registered robin. We have quite a few robins around our property. I've never seen a dead one. I don't,
So it could be that, yeah, I think I would need an ornithologist maybe to chime in on that one, but certainly in Toronto, I did not pick up any robins, but I mean, there's so many more birds and so many people patrolling. It could be that they have learned somehow over the years. I just don't have an explanation. for that.
well, they don't come to our feeder, when they're always looking in the grass.
So maybe they're just not in the vicinity. It's not interest.
It's funny though, I think we're like, the only ones I've ever found at our house is robins.
Oh, there you go.
And we have a lot of finches, because birds, I think it's because we have lots of robins on the lawn. And they fly up pretty low, you know, when they fly up, they kind of, whereas we don't seem to, I haven't found finches or any of the bird feeder birds don't seem to get. Bird feeder's pretty close.
And I think the important thing to remember is that what we experience is not necessarily representative of the whole. We
Yeah.
just we experience a very tiny part of it. So you may not get robins hitting your windows. It's just such a big problem on a big scale.
Question I have refers back to your original project when you went to the plat when you did the patrolling. That was for migratory birds, was it? Because you didn't do it all year.
No, so it was only spring and fall.
So is this something we should be focusing on perhaps during the spring and the fall season
So
as
that's,
a temporary measure?
yeah, so that's probably when they're gonna get more of your birds coming through. But I know, for instance, chickadees can be found year round around your neighborhood and your house and forest around here. And they're quite vulnerable to window strikes. So probably your experience, you're doing a great job if you're definitely addressing it in the migratory period. What would be interesting to know is if you have had window strikes, have you had them outside of the migratory period?
Which leads to be my second question. You found birds that were dead or injured. What happened to the injured birds?
So the injured birds are always the most challenging to rescue. Okay, so 5 in the morning, I look at that bird, I've got my little butterfly net, so we go over there and we were trained with our technique to try to retrieve the birds as steadily as possible. So if you use a butterfly net, that will trap the person, go in and collect them. We would have little paper bags prepared with little rings of paper towel so that the bird could perch on that ring. So put them in the paper bag. Note the time, the date, the place, and then we take them to the Toronto Wildlife Center. And they dealt with a lot of injured migratory birds. And interestingly, I remember reading one comment from a person that, you know, once they're injured and rehabilitated, they probably don't survive until they're going. That was just somebody's conjecture. They're actually doing a study now where injured birds that have been brought in and rehabilitated and let go. They put little trackers in. They can make tiny little minute trackers, GPS trackers, and they're trying to see, you know, what is the survivability after they've been injured and rehabilitated. You know.
There is a Hope for Wildlife Center on Deep Hollow Road.
That's right. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. And it's if you're wondering, because I was wondering what it was, if you heading west along White Rock Road from Gasbro and come to Deep Hollow, you go left, as if you're going down to the Gasbro River Trail. Keep going up, and you'll get there.
Black River.
I don't think it's that far. I think it's still in White Rock.
It's only about a
It's on
kilometer
the
up,
hill. You're still on the hill when you.
halfway up the hill.
Yeah,
It's up on the
Yeah.
hill.
yeah. They have a sign now. They didn't, when
Yes.
I was retrieving the injured bird. I couldn't find them, but now you can find them, so, yeah.
But I have an interesting patrolling, and it speaks to birds' ability to learn. So we dealt with migratory birds. So one Saturday morning, thankfully walking alone, all alone with my butterfly net sticking out of my backpack. And I look over my shoulder and I see there's a flock of pigeons following and walking. Okay, I keep walking. Anyway, my big suspicious were turn the corner. They turn the corner. But I realized so I mentioned on my front patrol is this, yes, so and so feeds them. But I wasn't feeding them. So we just that the butterfly net meant that I was friendly and was near and to feed them. It's very bizarre.
They're smart.
Birds are smart, even birds. Pigeons are cool.
I was just gonna say that the whole wildlife, something said that they're open to read for something,
Yeah,
Right, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And really, that is amazing. Any other questions?
I have a question, and I have the mic in my hand. Well, I might have two questions. The first one is, just a clarity around some of your numbers. There was a, when you were referencing like the percentage of collisions, it was like a 90% figure, and then there was a 10% low-rise buildings and 1% tall buildings. Does that mean most collisions we're seeing? Like,
So those are all estimates.
okay,
So, and remember, I did point out that what the author says, that we don't have any data on what hits houses. But based on the available data they had in modeling, so they did modeling. They came up with the theory or the estimate, I should say, that most of the collisions were caused by collisions with houses, windows and houses. So
Right.
based on.
yeah, that's interesting. I think I came in with the assumption that it would be the other way around. Maybe this is the assumption that we want to make as like us with low-rise housing. And I guess an observation that I had is, so our, like, the main, I mean, Alan and Ginny will notice the main window of our house, southern facing, has this like row of tall ornamental, you know, that tall ornamental grass, like very close in front of it. So in the summer, it's lovely. It's like we're in a forest, essentially, you know, of this grass. And I haven't observed, this is not to say it hasn't happened, or that a myriad of neighborhood cats haven't like taken off with the birds before I could find them, but I haven't seen any birds colliding because that grass is really, it's like a thick wall. I wonder if that, I'm not saying I'm gonna leave it like that. I think now in spring, I'm like, oh, I should put up some tape.
Consider the guidelines, if, you know, if they're close together.
Yeah,
If they're covering, you know, all of the glass, then they're probably not, they're gonna see that grass and they're gonna think, oh, I can't go through there because it's less
Yeah.
than my wingspan. So it could be.
Yeah.
Look at it in light of the guidelines.
yeah.
I mean, give you-
Anyway, it's just an observation that I've noticed in our, and of course, in winter or now it's more sparse, you know, the grass hasn't grown up, so I could be
So,
more
yeah, it
mindful,
could be
you know,
more
put a
sure.
temporary thing in until that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just something I've noticed that I found interesting in light of this talk.
You did the collection of birds as part of the study, am I correct?
No. The collection of birds is an ongoing volunteer activity that controllers carry on every year, spring and fall. But we collect the data. So what we have this list of data, and it turns out that, you know, a lot of the studies I was reading, they thanked Black for the data. So it sounds like the data has been used in studies. It was also used in a prosecution of a building in Toronto that had a really high rate of mortality due to window collision. So it's, we collected.
So there was an outcome of that data collection then.
Oh, for sure.
In the buildings that you were walking them, it's how, like, some of the buildings. Wonderful.
So an outcome, what do you mean by that?
I'm wondering, was there anything positive that came in the change of the way those buildings were constructed that resulted in a lower?
So those changes that the BBC video showed, those are newer buildings. What has happened in Toronto, which is based on probably the data at long-term, is Toronto implemented a municipal bylaw requiring new buildings for windows that pose a threat to birds to have markers, visual markers. And that's, I don't know how successful that's been. As a lawyer, and enforcement is what counts, I think, how it's enforced. I also know, and this is very disheartening, there are several buildings that put the markers on the inside of the windows. I don't know, they got that wrong.
But there is a precedent that there are bylaws out there for.
Yes.
That's
yes,
interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah, and like I said, got into the Canadian standards, CSA standard for bird friendly design of buildings, and I think what they're, I don't know if there's certain building certifications or green certified building certification. Most of them, if not all of them, did not include bird friendly design. I hope that's changing and maybe changing. But that's something to look back to. If you're green certified, you shouldn't have birds dying. All right.
Any more questions? It doesn't look like there's anything in the chat.
Well, the only thing in the chat was that Anna Srolli said that she'd used the feathered strips and they seem to have worked for her.
Yes, well, I use them. They seem to have worked. I haven't had any collisions with those cords. I just put those in there last year, so yeah, the visual markers.
How far apart are your feathered dots?
I put, the feathered dots, the dots I put 2 inches apart.
Right.
The cords I put a little less than 4 inches. So if you look at the average wingspan of the smallest bird we'll have around, which is the hummingbird, is about 3.75 to 4 inches. So you might want to, I think I went down to 3.75, but I went somewhere between 3.75 and 4 for the distance between the cords.
I should finish.
Oh.
How do I finish?
So thank you very much. That's all I have to say. So I hope that if you have questions that you can find out, you can contact me, you can contact Caroline. I'm happy to help. Yeah, and I hope you learned something, felt something out of this.
Thank you very much.
Good technology. Pretty good. Eh? I'm really happy.
Yeah, that's not as good as it gets.